Welcome, everyone. We are going to have a panel on intents. I will first ask all of you to present a bit, I guess, yourself, maybe your project, and what do you do with intents?
Oh, hi. My name is Anton Bukov, and I'm co-founder of 1inch. And yeah, regarding the intents, from the origin, we tried to remove fragmentation of the liquidity for the taker. And we did this successfully within transactions internally. And then we introduced intent-based approach where users place their Dutch auction and resolvers compete for this Dutch auction. And this is we think it's the greatest mechanism for price discovery. Recently, we announced 1inch Aqua, which is solving the liquidity fragmentation from other side. It's defragmenting liquidity for liquidity providers, but at the same time, it would dramatically increase fragmentation for takers. So we will add more work for everyone, for intents, for aggregators. Thank you.
It sounds good. Do you want to continue, Oxytocin?
Yeah, sure, why not? Buenos dias. I am Oxytocin. Nice to meet you, everyone. I do governance strategy at Velora. If you're not familiar with Velora, you're probably familiar with PerSwap. We just rebutted a few months ago. And I'd say intents was one of the core reasons why we had to do this kind of rebranding. People are familiar with PerSwap for the swapping itself. But as we're probably going to be discussing on this panel, intents are so much more than that. Just thinking about things that we announced recently, thanks to the things that we are able to unlock with intents, we're able to push way beyond just moving an asset from A to B. And I am really excited to discuss with some of the biggest brains in DeFi, where are we going forward with this? So, yep. Hey, everyone.
Yes, please.
Hey, everyone. I'm Jim. Happy to be here in Buenos Aires. I am a product lead at LI.FI, and I lead the intents product at LI.FI. And so LI.FI is a bridge index aggregator. So we work with many of the teams on this stage right now to surface routes. And we offer that as an API product to enterprise integrators like wallets like MetaMask and Phantom. And I lead the intents product at LI.FI. It's a brand new product by way of acquisition of my former team called Catalyst. And what we do is that we offer same chain and cross-chain and multi-chain intents for users to express and have gasless execution through various solver networks that we tap into. And so kind of similar to our legacy product of aggregation, but next generation using intents, we're going all in on intents. So excited to share more about our architecture and some of the design decisions that we made.
Hey, everyone. I'm Chen. We've been with CowSwap mainly focused on business development and partnerships. CowSwap was launched in 2021 with an intents-based model, so kind of pioneering this model. We are really true believers of this model and its ability to kind of fix on-chain execution. And looking forward to having this discussion.
Amazing. So the first thing I would like maybe to discuss in this panel would be the definition of intents, the difference between intents and transaction, and then we're gonna be discussing a bit maybe the security, the rest, the off-chain stuff, what needs to happen, maybe some standards, and then where you see everything going. So would one of you like to start by a bit defining intents so that we all agree and speak about the same thing?
Yeah, I think I can start. Thank you. So yeah, there was a joke in crypto Twitter about intents. That's probably the hugest rebranding of limit order protocols. Yeah, it's partially true, but I think it's more than that. I think that transaction-based approach is that you produce digital signature to create transaction where you explicitly mention what exactly should happen in this transaction. This is called imperative way to manage your funds, whatever you own, whatever you manage on chain. Meanwhile, intents usually is about creating digital signature again, but it's not transaction. It's like signing arbitrary message. It could be a message which is structured within some fields. This could be like a piece of text. It depends on the protocol, actually. But the thing is that you're rarely signing and something what you want actually to do, you're usually signing what you want to achieve. It's kind of declarative based, opposite to imperative based. So usually you declare what exactly you're willing to give away and what exactly you want to get. It could be assets, it could be actions. It depends on sophistication or like abstraction level and architecture of Intense protocol. But the thing is that you do not exactly specify how this should be achieved because you don't care. Because there are professional players who can be incentivized to compete, to achieve what you want in the best way on the market. So yeah, it could be something like specific rate if you want to achieve, or it could be Dutch auction, or it could be anything else. But the difference is imperative approach, where you define what exactly should happen, and declarative approach, where you define what you're going to spend and what you want to get. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Does anybody want to add something to that? Or
Yeah, I feel that was already a very technical definition. As a non-tech guy, I sometimes like to look into the big picture. And yeah, basically the way that I like to think about intents is that the biggest difference is instead of it being like a do-it-yourself kind of transaction, you're just telling somebody, I want this, and then somebody who usually does it a lot better than you is doing the execution on your behalf. So one of my hyper obsessions outside of Web3 is coffee. And I'd say that like a good way of defining intents with coffee is the difference between learning how to grind your coffee, or maybe go to a cafe and say like, make me a Robusta with a Lungo, 18 in, 34 out, whatever, versus intents, which is just like, can I have a coffee? The good one, please. And that's what makes it very different also now on the execution side. If you're thinking about a non-intent transaction, usually you have to like bundle everything together. You have to be very clear. Again, with the coffee, you have to be specifying your own gas limit. You have to be specifying how long it's going to be taking. Meanwhile, with intents, you're just saying like, hey, I really don't care how you're going to give it to me. I just want you to give me this in exchange of that. It gets formatted in a way where other people do it on your behalf. And then you get this afterwards. I know that I maybe oversimplified it for some of the more technical people in the panel, but that's the way I see it at least.
Okay, very interesting. But in the end, like from a user perspective, when they are just like signing a transaction, like or signing an intent, or just like basically using a simple front end, everything is already simplified. Like, what do you achieve even? How do you simplify it even more? Like, what is it going to change for the users who are just used to just clicking a button in the front end, and then maybe they open the wallet and click sign and didn't even look at what they signed anyway. So what's the real change?
So, I mean, we are a bit used to working on Web3, clicking on things and those things just not working. So we are way too familiar with like, I don't know, you click on something, you see like your wallet dropping a bunch of red text saying like error, whatever. And then you just say, okay, I guess I'm not trading today. Since you have to make sure that everything works in an atomic manner when you're not using intents, this happens so much more often. Meanwhile, with intents, you're able to just declare what you want, and then this abstraction and this execution on behalf of someone else tends to be what makes the experience actually much simpler. You have to rely on a lot less dependencies when you're actually executing the transaction. At least that's the way I see it. I don't know. What about this half of the panel?
Yeah, I would agree. I think like really tactically, like what the user sees versus, current behavior is that, I also have been in cases where I just blindly click on things. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And, God forbid it's like ledger and I have to like click through all the buttons. I'm like, okay, like I see this really large metadata field. Like, I don't care, like I have blind signing on, let's just do it. But I even think from that, like very, very, I guess like hyperbolic case to what intents can offer is still materially better. And I think tactically what that looks like is one, it's gasless. And so it's just a signed order effectively. And secondly, it could be one click. And so there are cases where a normal transaction on one blockchain is just one click for a user, right? But if you add in like token approvals, if you add in a multi-chain context, if you add in a bridge and then a swap and then something else, that becomes 2, 3, 4 transactions. But with intents, it's simply just one, right? And so that is really powerful. And also, I kind of alluded to this, the third piece is that there is ballooning complexity that is happening through a multi-chain context, and also the ability to do other actions beyond just bridging and swapping, right? Like depositing or staking and something like that. And so intents can also support that still with, really fast sub-second finality, one-click gasless UX, but also enveloping all these ballooning actions that we can provide, right? And so it's just strictly better from a UX perspective than even blindly clicking yes, yes, yes. Maybe you don't have gas, maybe you don't have the gas token in that case, but in intents, it doesn't really matter.
Amazing. Yeah, please go ahead.
I usually like to start with an analogy first. So imagine you need to cross the city, get to whatever, an address on the other side of the city. You can either with a kind of the transaction execution model, you can order a taxi, ask the taxi driver to start a meter and start telling the taxi driver exactly each turn how to go to the destination. If you get stuck into a traffic jam or a blocked road, it's kind of your problem. You keep paying for the meter. But in the intents-based model, you can kind of use an Uber. You just type in the destination, and the professional actor will find the best route for you to get to the destination. You pay a fixed price based on the destination. So that would be kind of a simple way to explain it. And I think just adding to that more on the technical side, maybe not kind of focusing on the exact way of how you express it. I think what really matters in the intent-based model is defining the way that defining how to maximize the user outcome. So this is the most important part. You need to, given a set of executions, you need to be able to say which one maximizes the user outcome. And this is what we call, the objective criteria in CowSwap. And this is the most important part. This is what makes just a limit order and intent, because you're able to create a competition and be able to confidently say that the winning solution is maximizing the user outcome.
I see. So that's interesting. So you would. It seems you all agree that the main things you are fixing is UX for the users, but also like providing better experience, pricing, better solutions without the user having to choose or do anything. Do you see any other benefits of intents other than those 2 points? Like maybe it provide like maybe some kind of MEV protection or other kind of benefits like this?
Yeah, I would say that originally blockchain was kind of a safe place because of like unavailability of many entities. But nowadays, blockchain is kind of much more dangerous space in terms of risks. When you sign transaction and you perform transaction on your own, you have many risks. Your transaction could be reverted. This doesn't only mean that you would spend gas fees for getting nothing. You would also spend some time and your resources to sign another transaction to achieve what you wanted to achieve. And yeah, all this MEV means that you would not get anything extra except your like minimum amount or like minimum threshold you have set in this exact transaction. With the intents, it's the opposite. With the right incentives, professional players who are doing this highly professional, they don't play with the rewards. They would not get it because they use other professional services to mitigate those risks. If you would make them compete in the right way, it's like incentive for them, they would be able to fulfill your intent with a even better rate, for example, than you expected. It's possible. It's a matter of incentives. So, yeah, making transactions became like much more sophisticated because DeFi became like a more fragmented, and it's getting more and more fragmented because market, which is highly fragmented in terms of opportunities, is kind of more efficient. It should be non-fragmented in terms of capital for the players, but it's still fragmented. I mean, we feel like fragmentation is something bad. We fight fragmentation, but we can't avoid fragmentation. Some entities create fragmentation, and other entities try to fight with it, but we still have fragmentation in the middle. So some entities defragment liquidity for makers, some defragment for takers, but at the end, between maker and taker, all liquidity will be highly fragmented because this would lead to higher efficiency of the market. So, yeah, making transactions is we should leave this to professionals at the end.
So just a small tangent before answering the question. The idea of like leaving to professionals made me think of something that like maybe is worth addressing in the world of intents as well. That like it's great for people that are getting new into the Web3 experience, the ones that like want this kind of as simple as possible, gas abstracted kind of ways. However, even if you're more experienced in the space, the part that I also find very exciting beyond just designing UX is the sheer modularity and ease of new implementations whenever you're doing an intent transaction. Because previously, let's say you were just working with a smart contract kind of execution. That smart contract is stuck on the blockchain. There's only so many parameters you can put in. And if there's something new developing, since the time you deployed it, I don't know, months, years ago, it's very difficult to actually be implementing those new strategies without risky things like upgradability and then trying to like re-audit every single time you make it. Meanwhile, with intents, you can find these kind of shortcuts, this kind of upgrades, this kind of like small price improvements that perhaps you wouldn't be able to do with a very rigid smart contract. I feel that's another thing that's super exciting about the world of intents, that you're able to have like these kind of modules. You're able to be like, okay, the user is just saying that they want to do A, B, and C. I am not constricted by smart contract logic into making it in a particular way. I just need to be executing the transaction, and then I can actually compete to find a new way to improve it. So yeah, just moving beyond the idea of like intents or improving execution, they're also improving the developer experience. I'm sure many solvers, agents, whatever other name they might have, are very happy whenever they're able to find a new way, a new innovation, and we're able to push the space forward thanks to intents.
Mm-hmm. So you started mentioning, or do you want to add something first on the benefits of intents?
Yeah, I'm just maybe adding a little bit. I don't know if there's anyone like new to Ethereum or to crypto here, but let me try to scare you first. If you want to try to execute a swap with a transaction, you need to first efficiently and with a like good price for you, you need to first know what is a validator, what is a block builder, what is a searcher. You need to know what is slippage. You need to know what is reverted transaction. All those like crazy terms that normal people usually don't understand and will never understand. And this is the exact kind of idea of coordinating all those layers of complexity in a way that all of them are basically achieving the best outcome for the end user. So the user doesn't need to know all this. It just expresses the outcome they want to achieve, and if there's real competition between those actors to win the right to execute the user transaction, then they will automatically try to offer the best execution for the user. So the user doesn't need to care about all these. They just know that by definition, good competition with the right definition of the user outcome will allow them to achieve a good trade or a good on-chain execution.
I also want to add that like I think we're talking in the context of intents as like a trade, basically, like a swap. But intents have the possibility to do far more than that, right? Like you can, as I said, you can do depositing, you can do staking, you can do borrowing, you can do leverage loops, you can mint NFTs, you can vote on DAO proposals, you can tip your friend on Farcaster. So really any on-chain action that you can do, any sort of like thing that is exposed as a method on a contract can be performed as an intent by a solver, right? And so that is in of itself very, very different than the current paradigm that we're operating in.
Yeah, I would contribute to that. I agree. And we have some intent protocol in research for quite a while. And we try to approach it from the perspective that any intent is usually two kinds of actions. One of them is whatever you are trying to spend, what you are permitting executor to get, and another part is what you're expecting. You could expect to receive something, or you could expect something to happen. So it's usually about two things: something what you would give away, as something what you would get in exchange. And it should not be one and one. It could be you could give away few things, and you would probably willing to get few things, or it could be a little bit more sophisticated. You could be willing to give away one of the options with sub options. It's like a generalized expression of or and ands within those what you spend, and the same thing within what you get. So yeah, thank you.
I see. And you keep saying that you have this agent and you have these solvers, and they should, given the competition, produce the best results for the users. But how do you actually ensure that this happens? Because if they start to maybe collude, or if they take the opportunity, because we have a new pool now, we have a pool of intents, and we have just now a subset, maybe, I don't know if it's public, the pool, of people who can maybe take opportunity or get some MEV risk out of it, or if they all agree together to give poor prices to get more benefits or something like that. What do you do against this kind of behavior?
Yeah, I would say it's a matter of incentives. If incentives are aligned properly, then those solvers, resolvers, well, it doesn't matter how you call them, they're professional players who execute to fulfill your intents. They would be aligned if your incentives would be aligned. We, in Oneinch, we do run Dutch auctions in favor of each user who is willing to swap. We use intents mostly for swaps now. So in favor of every user who is willing to swap, we have an intent with Dutch auction inside of it. So Dutch auction with a competition among resolvers is something what we think is the best for price discovery. And we also got some confirmations for our vision from the market. For example, Uniswap X, they use the same approach. They also mentioned our approach in their white paper. So it's complementary, I would say. So yeah, it's fair play. And yeah, we were not able to find any other solution on the Dutch auction to make it like really decentralized, to not have any other third party who is making decision which proposal is better. So the one who comes first serves first. So yeah, that's it.
So maybe I want to take it on a different approach. You were asking like, how can you guarantee they get the best possible rates, the first rates? My opinion is that you can't. What you can guarantee is that you get the least worst rates from the people that are competing. But this is a problem that you're always going to be having, because obviously these solvers, these agents usually are not a charity. They need to be able to get something out of this. And for me, at least, it's one of those coordination issues that we still have to get into solving deeper, because right now we rely on something like order flow, for example, to be able to benefit from this kind of flow. You complete to be able to get it, and then maybe they are able to get something out of it. You still have some kind of like additional layers onto it, and you're just hoping that the winning auction is the one that's going to be screwing the users the least. Obviously, there's ways of subsidizing it. You can go with like, token incentives. You can go with like some kind of slashing system. You can go into some kind of reputation system. but that tends to be the current, like, I don't know how to say it, like the golden issue, in my opinion, that we need to get into. Obviously, having something like the Dutch auction ended up being like the system that we settle into, because even though they take a bit longer, you see at least that like the price improvements are going to be happening. But yeah, I'd say just to finish my point, we are not guaranteeing the best prices. We're just hoping that we're able to see who is the one that is willing to screw the user the least for now.
I mean, I would push back on like what the definition of best price is in your case, because best is defined by the user, right? Like there are cases where the user, based on whatever context that they're find themselves in, may define best as quickest, right?
Yeah.
And they're like willing to take on some meaningful amount of slippage in order to execute it. And therefore you can design an auction mechanism that fulfills that, right? But of course, like if best is defined as price, I do agree with you. It is bounded from the sense of like how many solvers are actually participating in that auction. But I would also argue that, you know, if you have a very robust solver network that is participating in this order flow auction, you do ultimately see a very good price, especially if you have solvers that are purely sourcing from on-chain liquidity. Then it's like, okay, I'm either getting an on-chain liquidity quote or I'm getting a quote that's better than that because someone's using proprietary liquidity. And so it's like pretty good, like for all intents and purposes. It's certainly better than if you were to like vanilla execute it on chain.
For all intents and purposes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so adding to that a little bit, we use mechanism design a lot when we think about designing our protocol. And I think there's in order to ensure kind of best outcome for the user, there's a mix of short-term games. So in short-term games, they are usually like closer to zero-sum games. So in those cases, you need to hold a solver accountable. They have to have like some kind of stake that could be slashed if they are misbehaving. But there's also long-term games, iterative games. And those are not zero-sum games. So if a solver screws over a user, then users will probably not come anymore to trade, and then the solver will not have any business. So this is the long-term game that we are playing, and this is also important.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I never get the answer, like my actual answer, but auction design is super important to get right. And it's iterative, right? Like as we've seen with Cow, they are continuously revising how they do their own auction mechanism and the reward mechanism for the auction. And so, and I think all of us are also doing similar experiments. And so getting it right is usually a function of like, what are the objectives you want to achieve? And kind of there's trade-offs ultimately against those. And so for Cow, for example, best price execution, right? Like I personally trade with Cow if I want to get the best price execution, especially if I'm moving size in like an enterprise context. But the trade-off is twofold, right? It's like, it's not incredibly fast. In fact, it's non-deterministic how fast it is. And there's also the possibility that I don't get 100% fill, right? And so there's that trade-off, but I take on that trade-off knowing that, okay, I will still get the best price at that moment because of the auction mechanism they have, the surplus maximizing auction, right? Or mechanism. So for us, we actually take almost the exact opposite side of it. And so we always guarantee that 100% of your fill, of your intent will get filled, and we will guarantee it as quickly as possible. And so our auction mechanism is actually twofold. And so one is that it's reputation based within a certain window. And so we give solvers, based on some reputation that we calculate, effectively like a 1 second window to fill this. And if they don't fill that, then we do first come, first serve, which usually happens within another second. And so the worst case scenario that happens with an intent is that the user will have a 2 second fill, right? But usually in many cases, it happens a lot faster. It happens within like 300 to 500 milliseconds, which is under the perception of instantaneousness in human perception, right? That's like kind of our gold standard from a UX perspective. And so we solve that. But as you can tell from the mechanism that we deployed, it is not certainly going to be the best price, which is why as defined as, you know, as close to the limit or as, you know, as good of a price or good of a return that you can get for a user, right? But for us, we are optimizing for speed, especially in a cross-chain context. And so that became really important for us.
That's a very good point. Also, when we start going cross-chain, I feel there's a whole other layer about what is best, because bridges work in very different ways. So some of them, maybe some people value more security. Some bridges maybe are just basically multi-sig that is moving assets in and out. Others are going to be the fastest. Others are going to be giving you the best fees, but they might be taking longer to actually execute. So yeah, maybe that's another thing that we still have to design different mechanisms into. Whenever people think about intents, they think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of solution, when in reality, as you were saying, the definition of best is going to be extremely subjective to each user, depending on the use case they want to be making. And that's going to lead to very different mechanism designs. Yeah.
Just picking on a few of Jim's points. So first of all, I think when a user places their intent, there's no way to guarantee their execution. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's not true. Like there's no way to guarantee execution when the user places their intent. Second point is with regard to speed. Our thesis, it's not I think controversial, but the idea of blockchain, you have block times, and within blocks, there's no way to execute. So this is the kind of the main point. On Ethereum, you can't execute a user intent in 2 seconds because it takes 12 seconds. So this is what we are building on. We are using the time that it takes to anyway execute the transaction to collect multiple users' orders, and basically use this to even potentially improve further the user outcome by matching them directly.
By the way, when I say guarantee execution, I mean fill or kill. So it's like the full amount or it's zero. I do agree that there is no guaranteed execution in intent-based system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you spoke a lot about swaps, but also about more complex intents. Do we have any maybe standards or ways to describe? Because we are going to be starting to describe more and more complex things that we want happening, like maybe multi-step. Maybe we want to take this and move it to this chain, and also do this with this on this chain. And many things are going to happen in a single instance, and you guys seem to want that to happen in one click. So how are the users going to be able to describe such complex interactions?
Yeah, I actually wanted to answer this question. We recently announced 1-inch Aqua, but this was also only half of our press release. The other part of it is a thing which we call Swap VM. And this is a great intent-based abstraction and architecture, which works with everything what could looks like a swap, and which operates instructions inside of it. So you could define with instructions like whatever you want would happen as your trading strategy. So you're like using intent to describe your trading strategy. This could be one single directional swap, like a swap, Dutch auction, TWAP, DCA, whatever looks like a single directional swap. Or it could be also bidirectional swaps or multi-directional swaps like AMMs or like multi-dimensional AMMs. And we are going to release this as a final product for our users at the end of this year or the beginning of the next year. And the thing that we will also attach to it our like innovation, which we call cross-chain intents. And this thing which technically lets you to express the intent of something, what could happen in multiple chains simultaneously. You could be willing swapping assets from multiple chains into single chain or from multiple to multiple. It depends on what you will try to describe, but you will be able to express that, and this mechanism to achieve this cross-chain intents is in the opposite direction to like how people usually write code in smart contracts. So this approach will be accessible for any other developer in any other protocol. And moreover, it would not let it wouldn't require support from some protocols. Users will be able to have this support on their own. They will be able to do some additional actions to have support this feature for some protocols which are not even aware about this thing. So yeah, it's going to be open source.
Yeah, and I also think it's going to be trending towards this kind of like multi-chain kind of system, because yesterday we also announced like this kind of productive limit orders to be able to start a limit order on one chain and finish on another. And this is something that it's one of these biases that I feel everyone in the audience, since you're all familiar with Ethereum, we have to kind of like continue minimizing, that most people actually in the future will not really be caring, hopefully, about like which chains are going to be going. They just want the best possible liquidity and for the solvers agents to be able to execute it. I feel that when you were asking about like how are you going to be showing all of these different steps, the way that what I was imagining in my head is whenever you pay by card and you tap it, and then you see all those words flashing quickly about like contacting POS server, getting answer, getting the handshake, doing all the TLS stuff. Yeah, sure. If you're technical and you really want to go how the transaction is working or why it failed, it's all necessary. But most end users just want to see like, is my thing happening? Is my thing executing? Did it happen fast enough? So for 90% of users, that kind of complexity is probably going to be hidden more and more and more over time. There are still going to be these kind of like more expert-friendly kind of interfaces, probably more like code-based interfaces that show you all the steps that allow you to play more into what you're going to be making. But I can see those over time really, really becoming more of a niche use case, which I am a bit into two minds about it. On one hand, we have the mass adoption. We do want people to be using it. We want to have an experience as good as a fintech. But on the other hand, we want to be having this kind of like decentralization, trust but verify, and this kind of systems to actually be still present in Web3. So talking about the future a bit, because we're almost on time, but I feel that's going to be something that we're really going to have to be addressing in the next few years. How can we advance on the intent space while still maintaining these core principles of Ethereum, of transparency, modularity, and things actually settling on chain? But yeah.
Jim, Chen, do you want to add something to that? Otherwise, I have one last question, but after that, we're out of time. So
I can add a little bit on complex intents, because this was the original question. Maybe a little bit of spicy take, but I believe intents should keep super simple. This is the only way that you can create a very robust competition around them. Once you create very complex intents, then you will have like very thin competition around them, and the user will not get good execution necessarily, or a predatory behavior. So the way we think about it at CowSwap is basically like when a user is starting state and end state are like fungible positions, could be represented in theory as like ERC20 tokens, then you can just represent it as a very simple trading intent. If one of the either the end or the starting or the end state are non-fungible positions, like a position on a lending protocol that involves debt, then you can potentially create an intent that is super simple. It's just trading one token to another, and all the rest is expressed as an additional execution instructions for the winning solver. So this is the way we think about it, and we think about extending simple intents with additional execution instructions instead of basically making all kind of very specific complex intents.
I agree, by the way. Like, I think the auction mechanism should be really simple. Exactly what was just said. And it's just like additional instructions that need to be executed. And so I believe CowSwap has hooks. That's what you guys call it. And we have a very similar concept. So you just construct and call data, and there's instructions for the winning solver to execute that. And their payout is based on them following those orders as well. So I don't believe in a world where it's like multi-auction or auctions on more complicated processes. Like I think it needs to be quite simple.
So I would just add, like I understand where you're coming from, but if you want to be keeping things simple, if you wanted to just make things as simple as possible and as transparent as possible, it might be better to just stay on like on-chain execution, because that's the one that it's atomic and simulates it and can actually get these things out. Personally, if we are willing to sacrifice some of this decentralization for intents, it's to be able to introduce this complexity that is simply not possible to execute within the block time and these kind of things. I understand that like perhaps with current auction systems that can lead to more extraction, but these are the challenges that we're facing right now in the Ethereum ecosystem, that perhaps we have situations that are simply not possible to execute just by signing a transaction on chain, and that's where intents come in. So, I mean, we'll see in the future how it goes, but for me, that's the part that's most exciting.
Finally, we got to the debate part, but we have to finish.
Yes, indeed, unfortunately.
Play the music.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are out of time, but this was really nice, guys, and thank you very much for coming, everyone.
Let's get the
Thank you.
asado.